These are the most interesting historical photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. This photo shows the Mona Lisa after its recovery in 1913, 2 years after Vincenzo Peruggia removed it from the Louvre in 1911 because he believed it should be in Italy. Harry Houdini and his wife Bess performed in the Welsh Brothers circus troupe around 1895 when they toured as Houdini with escapes from handcuffs and stage magic. Before becoming internationally famous, he learned life on the road in small traveling shows. Ma Rawlinson from Bethnal Green, London, hand-stuffs mattresses with straw and horsehair in a small courtyard that is part of the cottage workshops that supplied working families around 1900. East End manufacturers love that she redoes the bedding every season to keep it dry and durable. Jackie Kennedy's pink Chanel-style suit, which was later knitted in honor of that day in Dallas in 1963, was already well known in her wardrobe. She wore it in March 1962 when she visited her sister Lee Radziwill in London, and again in October 1962. In 1947, papers covered strange debris near Roswell, but the United States Air Force said it was a weather balloon, and the story faded. A 1980 book revived it with cover-up claims and helped create the modern unidentified flying object legend. This is a Soviet hydrofoil passenger ship, the Raketa, or later, the Meteor, which ascends on hydrofoils to race along the Volga and other major rivers. Designed by Rostislav Alexeyev, it was commissioned in 1957. Men of the Bira people in the Belgian Congo, photographed in 1924, wear a traditional upper lip ornament known as a labre. The plug turned the upper lip outward and signaled adult status and identity within the community. Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, visits a Bosnian unit under German command in 1943 during a training demonstration. His tour of camps in the Balkans was staged for wartime propaganda and recruitment. India's Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru playfully throws a cushion during an Indian National Congress session in 1955. The light moment shows the usually serious leader relaxing with colleagues amid tense post-independence politics. Cadillac Le Mans Concept, 1953, a fiberglass show car designed by Harley Earl with a wraparound dashboard and a row of round gauges. 4 were built for exhibitions, and its styling influenced mid-1950s Cadillacs. An American soldier is comforted by a comrade near Hakton-ni, Korea, on August 28, 1950, during the Korean War. This photo became a stark record of frontline stress and loss in the early months of the conflict. Men wear early Michelin Man suits during a street promotion in Berlin in 1928. The bulky Bibendum costume advertised tire durability and soon became one of the world's longest-running brand mascots. Victorian dollhouses in the 1880s were scale models with real wood trim, glass windows, and rooms that mirrored full-size homes. Wealthy families commissioned cabinet makers and architects to display taste and status. A Soviet Ka-25PS helicopter lifts crew from the trawler Svobodny during a storm near the Kuril Islands in 1977. Operating from the patrol ship Iceberg, the crew flew repeated runs for about 8 hours and saved 36 people. A vintage Chinese advertisement promotes a ceramic pillow of eternal youth, a hard headrest sold as traditional wellness gear. Marketers claimed it could help with high blood pressure, eye troubles, paralysis, weakness, rapid heartbeat. Giant fans inside the wind tunnel at Ames Aeronautical Laboratory, Moffett Field, California, in 1948, used to push controlled air past test aircraft. Data from this tunnel guided lift, drag, and stability work that shaped post-war aviation and early space projects. Henry Rechatin crosses a high cable while standing on the roof of a Renault 4L that is rigged to balance on the wire over the Saint Laurent Valley at Rochefort in 1967. During the 1970s energy crisis in the United States, fuel shortages and price spikes led to long lines and cases of siphoning. Many drivers posted homemade warnings and added locking gas caps to protect their fuel at home and at stations. Chicago Union Station's Great Hall in the 1940s, decorated with Allied flags and signs for the USO. During World War II, the station moved millions of service members and travelers through its vast concourse. 4 teenagers pose with homemade model airplanes in 1934, when aviation fever sparked school clubs and weekend contests across many cities. Building and flying these wood and paper models trained future pilots and engineers in basics of lift. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, 1940s. Children of Manhattan Project workers grew up in the restricted secret city with schools and clubs inside the fence. Teacher Elsie Novi founded a Girl Scout troop in 1943 to give students normal activities amid wartime secrecy. On October 30, 1938, Orson Welles aired The War of the Worlds on CBS as a breaking news summary, which made some listeners think for a moment that a real event was taking place. Later research has shown that the famous story of a nationwide panic was exaggerated. Ellis Island inspectors did not assign new American names. They verified names already written on the ship's manifest. Most changes came from earlier paperwork errors, later naturalization records, or personal choice to fit in. In 1942, Japanese pilot Nobuo Fujita dropped incendiary bombs near Brookings, Oregon, which was the only Axis air attack on the continental United States, and rainy weather stopped major fires. Harriet Quimby, a New York journalist turned pilot, became the first American woman with a license in 1911, and on April 16, 1912, flew solo across the English Channel from Dover to Calais. Her record was largely overlooked because the Titanic sinking dominated headlines the day before. George H.W. Bush and Barbara Pierce on their wedding day, January 6, 1945, at the First Presbyterian Church in Rye, New York. He was a United States Navy pilot, home on leave. They later became the 41st president. Helen Gibson, one of the first Hollywood stuntwomen, leaped from a station roof onto a moving train for The Hazards of Helen in 1914. She had measured the distance on a parked car, but the rocking nearly threw her off, and she caught a vent to finish the shot. A Syrian food vendor serves customers from a pushcart in New York City. Around the 1910s, part of an immigrant street food scene that fed workers. In 1927, a typical Sunday dinner menu listed clam broth, baked ham with breadcrumbs, cheese potatoes. Los Angeles Police Bulletin from January 1947 seeks information on Elizabeth Short, later known as the Black Dahlia, in a famous unsolved case. Newspapers nationwide sensationalized the investigation, and rumor-filled headlines often eclipsed verified details. A Roma woman with typhus at Bergen-Belsen in April 1945 waits for medical aid soon after the camp's liberation. Epidemics swept the overcrowded site in the final months of the war, and relief teams worked to treat survivors. Children at the Military Resettlement Center on Tule Lake in California play with a model of their barracks in 1942. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, more than 120,000 people of Japanese descent on the west coast of the United States were evicted from their homes and sent to government camps. Around 1930 in Britain, a telephone company promoted new service with a motorcycle and sidecar shaped like a giant telephone, branded Post Office Telephones. The rolling billboard displayed, "You are wanted on the telephone," and toured city streets to attract customers. Edward Court began collecting bird eggs at the age of 8, learning how to shake out the contents without breaking the shell. By 1935, he had collected more than 30,000 eggs of 312 North American species. A man listens to a pocket transistor radio through a single earphone, the set tucked into his hat in the 1960s. Cheap transistor radios, introduced in the mid-1950s, made portable personal listening a daily habit worldwide. Men run with a giant tetrahedral kite designed by Alexander Graham Bell around 1907 in Nova Scotia. Built from hundreds of small pyramid cells, these man-lifting kites tested lift and control for early aviation research. German soldiers pose with a stuffed bear turned roadside sign on the route between Berlin and St. Petersburg during World War II. Such improvised displays and mascot photos were common snapshots taken by troops during brief breaks. German troops march past Lloyd's Bank during the occupation of the Channel Islands between 1940 and 1945. The islands were the only part of the British Isles seized by Germany in World War II. Before entering politics, Ronald Reagan was a lifeguard in Dixon, Illinois, credited with many rescues, then a radio announcer, and by the late 1930s, he had become a new actor at Warner Brothers. This magazine spread helped create the image of an impeccable hero. Behind the scenes of the filming of Sgt. Pepper's cover version of the Lonely Hearts Club in 1967, Peter Blake used an unused fragment with the infamous Dictator, which did not make it into the final collage. The team felt that it would detract from the concept, so they pushed it aside during the session. A novelty telephone robot costume from the mid-1900s, assembled from handset parts, lamps, and a hinged mouth for stage demos. Props like this appeared at trade shows and company events to draw attention to new phone technology. Rows of crash test dummies were installed in a Boeing 720 aircraft to demonstrate a controlled impact in 1984, a joint FAA and NASA test of kerosene fuel that prevents fogging. The remote-controlled aircraft was sent to a prepared site to study cockpit survivability, seatbelts, and fuel behavior. Venice, 1951. At the famous Ball of the Century, artists in snow-white costumes and black masks greeted the guests in a fantastic atmosphere of the 16th century. Famous visitors included Orson Welles, Salvador Dali, and Christian Dior. Myra Hindley on Saddleworth Moor near Manchester, photographed by Ian Brady during the 1960s Moors case. Investigators later used this image to help locate a victim's burial site. A 1920s stage act. Motorcyclists ride a large rotating rig while a strongman lies under the central beam to demonstrate endurance. Such mechanical stunts toured fairs and music halls, blending motors and human strength for live shows. The Beatles at the Ed Sullivan Show in New York on February 9, 1964, the night of their first television appearance in the United States, which attracted about 73 million viewers. This show marked the beginning of Beatlemania in America. Frida Kahlo at Casa Azul in Coyoacán in the late 1930s wore a Tehuana dress, which became her calling card and glorified the indigenous people of Mexico. Her crown of braided braids, bold jewelry, and shawl echoed her expressive image. A United States serviceman shows his steel helmet marked July 15, 1969, with a deep dent from a hit that spared him. The protective shell absorbed the impact and likely saved his life during the Vietnam War. Marilyn Monroe speaks with President John F. Kennedy at a reception during his birthday gala on May 19, 1962. Her crystal-covered gown is the same one she wore to sing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" that evening. Winston Churchill sits in the cockpit of an aircraft during World War II, calmly smoking a cigar while airborne. The image reflects his larger-than-life persona and disregard for convention, even mid-flight. Elvis Presley in United States Army uniform in West Germany, serving with the 3rd Armored Division, Spearhead, 1958 to 1960. He trained as a tank crewman and was honorably discharged in March 1960. John F. Kennedy, photographed riding a horse during the 1960 presidential campaign trail. The casual image captured him connecting with rural voters in a more approachable, down-to-earth setting. Albert Schweitzer, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, photographed playing the organ. Known for his humanitarian work in Africa, he was also an accomplished musician and Bach scholar. Marilyn Monroe visits United States troops in Korea during her February 1954 tour, wearing a flight jacket between shows. She performed 10 shows in 4 days for more than 100,000 service members. Mahatma Gandhi rides a bicycle during India's independence movement, a rare informal image of the leader who championed simple living. He favored modest travel and homespun khadi as symbols of self-reliance and protest against colonial luxury. Queen Elizabeth II laughs alongside Prince Philip during a public engagement, captured in a candid moment from the mid-20th century. Such off-guard images showed the monarch's warm side beyond official portraits and ceremonies. Alternators inside a hydroelectric power station in present-day Turkmenistan, photographed by Sergei Prokudin-Gorsky in 1911 using his three-color method. His glass plate exposures were combined to produce early color images of the Russian Empire. Charlie Chaplin delivers the closing speech in his 1940 film The Great Dictator, calling for liberty and human dignity. The movie used sharp satire to challenge authoritarianism and was Chaplin's first full talking feature. John F. Kennedy takes the oath of office on January 20, 1961, administered by Chief Justice Earl Warren on the west front of the United States Capitol. His inaugural address introduced the new frontier and the famous call to civic service. A Sony Walkman cassette player with frequency modulation and amplitude modulation radio, shown with its lightweight foam earphones. Introduced in 1979, it made private portable listening mainstream and paved the way for later personal players. Behind the scenes of E.T. the Extraterrestrial in 1982, Steven Spielberg rehearses a bathtub setup with the animatronic puppet. The bathroom scene was later cut before release, one of several edits to keep the film's gentle, family tone. A British Royal Navy SSZ-class non-rigid airship during World War I, with its simple open gondola slung under the gas bag for coastal patrols and submarine spotting. These blimps cruised slowly with small bombs and depth charges, giving long endurance over sea lanes. Cold War-era Soviet prototype, a tracked launcher carrying a large ramjet-guided missile, an early surface-to-air system tested before standard models entered service. Designs like this explored mobile air defense with heavy missiles on tank chassis. USS Enterprise CVN-65 used its steam catapult to fling a surplus car overboard during disposal near the Philippines in 1978. The launch left a white steam trail like a jet takeoff and was watched by crew on the flight deck. A Berlin mother pushes a pram while wearing a gas mask after an air raid in 1943. Daily life continued under bombing, and civilians often used masks during alerts as they moved through damaged streets. Thai soldiers on a war elephant with a howdah, early 1900s, when Siam still used elephants for patrols, hauling guns, and jungle transport. Firearms made elephant charges obsolete, but mounted units lingered in Southeast Asia into the 20th century. Greek destroyer Adrias, L-67, sails without her bow after striking a mine in October 1943 near the Dodecanese. With temporary fixes, she beached in Turkey, then limped to Alexandria under her own power. A Dutch klepperman, night watchman, holds his wooden clapper, used to mark the hours, warn of fire, and wake workers in the early 20th century. Many towns kept such patrols before modern alarms and phone networks. Late 1800s long-manned horse on a cabinet card, shown at fairs and traveling shows, when breeders grew manes and tails for years to reach floor length. Handlers kept the hair braided and protected between exhibitions to prevent breakage and keep the record lengths. Snow outlines a dense grid of overhead telephone and telegraph lines in a big American city around 1900, turning the street into a web. After the Great Blizzard of 1888 revealed the risks of overloaded poles, cities began moving utilities underground, and the skyline slowly cleared. Dutch soldiers trained to move across frozen canals on skates with rifles during winter maneuvers in the late 1930s. Skating let patrols cover long distances quickly and keep communications moving when roads and bridges were blocked by ice. The schooner Mildred sinks upright with sails still set in 1912 after running aground in fog, captured by the Gibsons of Scilly. The crew were rescued, and the eerie calm made this one of Britain's most striking shipwreck photographs. Eiffel Tower illuminated for the 1900 Exposition Universelle with thousands of bulbs and a rotating searchlight beacon at the summit. The display showcased electric power and served as a city landmark and navigation aid at night. Frederick Sims demonstrates the Motor Scout, an armed quadricycle with a Maxim gun, around 1898 to 1899. Built on a Daedion Bhutan chassis, it was one of the first motorized fighting vehicle experiments. NASA later discovered that the original slow-scan videotapes of Apollo 11 had been erased and reused during a cassette shortage in the late 1970s, so the first-generation recording was lost. The clearest images we have to date have been obtained from restored television broadcasts. The San Cristobal rocket launch site, photographed during the Cuban Missile Crisis, showed the secret deployment of Soviet nuclear missiles just 90 miles from the United States. The tense standoff in November 1962 nearly brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. Long before the celebration at the Brandenburg Gate, desperate East Berliners tried to escape using tunnels, balloons, and even meat hooks, but most attempts ended in arrests, tragedies, or failure. More than 100,000 people risked everything to get over the wall. In 1932, the Australian military launched a machine gun campaign to stop tens of thousands of wild emus destroying crops, but it proved almost impossible to defeat the birds. After thousands of shots and few results, the war ended badly. The emus outsmarted the soldiers and left as accidental winners. Desperate South Vietnamese pilots landed helicopters on American ships during the evacuation, forcing the crews to push valuable planes into the sea to make room for new refugees. The chaos on deck was reminiscent of the panic after the fall of Saigon. Indian camel cavalry units were famous for mounting heavy guns on camels, which combined mobility and firepower in rough terrain. In Jaipur and Rajasthan, these so-called zamburaks allowed Indian troops to take the enemy by surprise. A tall bicycle with the Eiffel Tower, reaching 13 feet in height, attracted attention in the 1890s when daredevils rode high above the city streets during bike parades and races. Riders often needed help landing and risked plummeting just to join this short-lived craze for heights using pedals. This impressive photograph shows a large historic building erected on stilts as part of a complex relocation process that was surprisingly common in 19th century America. Workers used wooden beams, screw jacks, and horses to move schools and entire houses without damaging them. Maria Oktyabrskaya found out that her husband had died in battle, so she sold all her possessions to buy a new T-34 tank, demanded that she drive it herself, and called it a combat friend. She became the first female tankman to be awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. Agnieszka Kaszparkova, a 90-year-old artist from Lucca, Czech Republic, became famous for painting bright blue floral patterns on white village buildings inspired by Moravian folk art. During the Great Depression, families like this one lived in dilapidated tent camps and abandoned cars, using improvised materials as shelter wherever they could find a place. Despite the losses and difficulties, the mothers fought for their children to be fed and to live together. These used car parks became a lifeline during the Great Depression, offering cars at the lowest prices for as little as $29 when few people could afford new cars. The Circus Explorer stands proudly, and a young acrobat poses solemnly on his shoulder, surrounded by ornate circus wagons that remind of grandiose performances and exciting interludes. A horse-drawn float rolls through muddy streets, carrying hooded figures draped in dark, mysterious robes, their faces hidden and intent unread. This spectral procession, likely part of a circus or carnival parade. This behind-the-scenes moment from the movie Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Captures Manhattan, shows Jason Voorhees riding in a real subway car in a costume, surprising real passengers with cinematic horror. The film crew filmed this iconic chase in Vancouver, transferring the Hollywood horror directly to public transport. This remarkable photograph from the 1880s shows a man who lost his nose and underwent early reconstructive rhinoplasty, after which Dr. E. Hart at Bellevue Hospital in New York made a prosthesis from his own finger. A young Ndebele girl in South Africa, 1955, demonstrates incredible strength and balance while carrying a heavy bundle of firewood wrapped in a traditional orange cloth on her head. Her brass and copper jewelry show cultural pride. After Naomi Sutherland's death in 1893, The famous Sutherland Sisters Hair Act project was supported by the hiring of Anna Louise Roberts, a Pennsylvania native known for her nearly 9-foot-long hair. Roberts toured with the band for several years, arousing curiosity and mystery when she replaced her lost sister. This rare photograph shows a man subjected to the Chinese kanga, a heavy wooden collar fastened around his neck as a means of public humiliation and pacification. Kangas were used until the early 20th century, often leaving a person immobilized and dependent on others. A Chinese prisoner struggles with the enormous weight of a kanga, a punishment device designed to immobilize and shame offenders in public. The excessive height and volume of this collar made movement almost impossible, increasing the pain and humiliation. The General Electric handyman robot, created by Ralph Mosher in 1958-1959 for a program to create nuclear engines for airplanes, could accurately simulate the movements of human hands, twist hula hoops, and wield tools during its press debut. Eva Braun, pictured here among Nazi officials, was Adolf Hitler's longtime companion and short-lived wife, living most of her adult life alone in Hitler's residences and capturing their immediate surroundings with her photographs. Despite his proximity to power, Braun remained a mysterious figure until the very end. During World War II, German anti-aircraft gunners sometimes donned talismans to boost morale in difficult conditions, as shown in this rare photograph of the regimental mascot next to a massive 88mm Flak 36 anti-aircraft cannon. Prisoners in striped uniforms perform forced labor digging trenches in a Nazi concentration camp, an experience marked by brutality and exhaustion. During the Second World War, millions of people were exploited in such camps. The Reichstag fire broke out on February 27, 1933, engulfing the German Parliament building in Berlin and shocking the nation. The Nazi leaders immediately blamed the communists for the fire, using the event to demand emergency powers. A rare child's photograph shows Vladimir Putin as a teenager in Leningrad in 1966, several years before he rose from a difficult post-war environment to senior positions in Russian politics. Putin's early life was marked by difficulties and resilience, which shaped his desire to Farm Security Administration nursery at a California migrant camp, late 1930s. Infants rest in numbered wicker baskets while a caregiver feeds a bottle. These portable cribs kept babies safe and separated as parents worked nearby in the fields. Sanctuary Wood, Hill 62, Ypres Salient, a preserved British second-line trench system with zigzag works, corrugated revetments, and dugouts still visible today. The area, used for casualty evacuation behind the front in 1914-1915, remains one of Belgium's rare intact World War I trench networks. Front page of Caracas. Daily El Nacional on August 6, 1962, announces Marilyn Monroe's passing. Papers worldwide reported authorities suspected a barbiturate overdose and opened inquiries, turning it into a major international news story. Cold War ad for Flowbar. A-bomb detergent claimed soap could wash away fallout particles after an atomic attack, citing guidance that detergent removes surface contamination. Civil defense marketing pushed pocket decon soaps and home kits, though protection was limited. Bletchley Park's electromechanical bomb racks, whose relays rapidly tested Enigma settings during World War II. Alan Turing devised the bomb's core methods, accelerating Allied code breaking and influencing early computing. A mobile camera, Obscura wagon, common in the late 19th century, projected a live outdoor panorama onto a table inside using a lens and mirror. These traveling darkrooms were precursors to photography, used by artists for drawing aid and by showmen as optical theaters. 1940s pinup-style ad from Pacific Citrus Products Co. of Fullerton, California, promoting Quick Way Bar Mix with the line, "World's Largest Lemons." It shows how mid-century brands used playful double meanings and pin-up imagery to sell everyday drink mixers. Westminster Bridge in winter with the Elizabeth Tower, Big Ben, and double-deckers, early post-war London. Coal heating made snow sooty and smog severe, helping drive the Clean Air Act of 1956. In 1910, at Moon Lake, Mississippi, a fisherman posed with a giant alligator gaur, a living fossil whose lineage stretches back over 100 million years. Adults can reach about 3 meters and over 100 kilograms, ranking among North America's largest freshwater fishes. Charlie Chaplin spars with towering co-star Max Swain while honing the physical gags for the gold rush in the United States between 1923 and 1925. Their height mismatch became comic gold on screen, powering the film's slapstick rhythm. In the legendary photo taken in honor of the 4th of July 1953, Marilyn Monroe poses next to a huge firework display and an inscription warning, "Beware of danger, July 4th." This playful image dedicated to America's Independence Day. Elizabeth Taylor, one of Hollywood's most striking icons, samples dishes in the vibrant Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer studio kitchen in a rare off-camera moment. The studio's chefs often prepared delicious meals for the stars, and Taylor was known for her lively personality and love of entertainment. In the late 40s of the last century, in Venice, Ernest Hemingway met Adriana Ivancic, an 18-year-old Italian poet who became his last muse. Their connection inspired Hemingway to write the novel Across the River and Among the Trees, which combines reality with a literary legend in history. In Essen, in 1944, a local resident angrily shook his fist at a captured American pilot, a scene filled with the tension of war. Similar clashes occurred when downed Allied pilots were demonstrated in front of civilians, upset by the destruction caused by the bombing. On Inauguration Day in 1993, President George H.W. Bush looked at the United States Capitol from a helicopter as he took off after Bill Clinton was sworn in. In 1931, a couple performed a risky dance on the ledge of a skyscraper in New York City, looming high above the bustling city streets. The bold photo demonstrated the spirit of striving for thrills of that era. Soviet mortar crews in American Dodge WC-51 vehicles are seen in front of the Austrian Parliament in Vienna, April 1945. These Red Army troops pulled 2 120mm mortars, marking the final days of World War II and the fierce battle for Vienna's historic center. In 1958, Elvis Presley entered military service, pausing his meteoric music career for 2 years of duty in the United States Army. His decision to serve as a regular soldier, not an entertainer, boosted public respect and transformed his image worldwide. In the 30s of the last century, the Kasimov City Bell Tower was converted into a skydiving training ground for Soviet youth and military cadets. This amazing sight symbolized the first Soviet efforts to popularize parachuting in everyday life. In 1941, German forces marked an artillery shell with the phrase, "Another 1,000 shots to Moscow," as a grim message during the offensive against the Soviet capital. Such inscriptions were meant to intimidate, symbolizing the intense psychological and artillery warfare of the battle for Moscow. In the early 50s of the last century, Kristen Jorgensen became world famous as the first American woman to become widely known for her sex reassignment surgery. Her transition age in Denmark attracted huge public attention, turning her into a leader in the struggle for recognition of transgender people and their rights. In 1942, on the island of Tarakan, a Japanese pilot is captured with his pet monkey, a rare example of friendly communication in the harsh reality of war. Many military personnel appreciated animal mascots that brought comfort. Robert Oppenheimer was the scientific director of the Manhattan Project and was named the "Father of the Atomic Bomb" for leading the creation of the world's first nuclear weapon. His pioneering work at Los Alamos in the 40s of the 19th century changed history and defined the entire nuclear age. The second-class cabins on the Titanic were equipped with bunks, a sofa, a hand-operated sink, and mahogany furniture, which was surprisingly comfortable for that era. Passengers enjoyed more privacy than on earlier liners, with brightly enameled walls and daily linen changes, although the bathrooms were shared. The photo shows a geometric structure on Mars that has caused controversy online. but mainstream science believes it is most likely a natural formation. NASA and planetary geologists usually attribute such shapes to squares. This rare photo shows a Goldschmidt toad found in Ontario, Canada, with a macromutation that put its eyes inside its mouth. This condition was probably caused by a genetic error or a parasite causing the toad to open its mouth. On January 22, 1973, a long line of students from the University of Southampton waited outside for a rare Led Zeppelin concert in the old refectory building. The intimate university concert was superbly recorded, capturing the legendary set and the peak of the band's popularity. Nurse Maria Popova is recognized as a source of inspiration for machine gunner Anka, the famous female character from the 1934 film Chapayev. In 1917, Popova participated in the Russian Civil War as a frontline medic, and her bravery was later mythologized in Soviet cinema. In 1937, 19-year-old Robert Wadlow, who stood 8 feet 7 inches tall, became a sensation as the tallest man in history. His gentle demeanor and rapid growth made him a popular figure, inspiring admiration and respect during his public appearances. In June 1956, Elvis Presley was photographed backstage at Richmond's Mosque Theater during a playful kiss with 20-year-old Barbara Gray, known as the Mysterious Kisser. The menu of Alcatraz prison in September 1946 included hearty dishes such as roast pork shoulder, beef pie in pots, baked cod, and jambalaya with bacon, which testified to the high quality and variety that made its cuisine famous among American prisons. The prisoners and guards ate the same generous portions. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress, the most advanced bomber of the Second World War, could carry up to 20,000 pounds of bombs in its huge compartment. The narrow passages of the bomb bay and its huge volume meant that crew members sometimes had to crawl among loaded bombs. In August 1944, General Dwight D. Eisenhower inspected the damaged German Tiger II tank in Chambois, France, after the fierce battle of the Falaise Gorge. The Tiger II was one of several destroyed as a result of concentrated airstrikes. In 1965, American soldiers were stationed at observation posts like this one along the Vietnamese coast near Da Nang to detect enemy activity and protect air bases. These early years were marked by high morale and the arrival of new military personnel, as the United States significantly increased the number of its troops. At the Olympic Games in Helsinki in 1952, Coca-Cola delivered more than 30,000 cases of its drink by ships from the Netherlands. The campaign was called Operation Muscle because at that time there was no local bottling plant in Finland. Launched in 1899, the Tashmoo paddle steamer, nicknamed the White Flyer, was the pride of Detroit and could carry up to 4,000 passengers on popular excursions along the Detroit River and Lake St. Clair. Known for its speed and luxury, Tashmoo was once considered one of the fastest and most beautiful pleasure steamers. In July 1973, a young Angela Merkel, then known as Angela Kastner, cooked over a campfire with friends during a hike in Himmelfort, East Germany. Merkel, who later earned a doctorate in quantum chemistry and became Chancellor of Germany, enjoyed the outdoors. George W. Bush attended Yale University from 1964 to 1968, where he earned a degree in history and played baseball and rugby. Although Bush is best known for his leadership in sports and student organizations, his athletic enthusiasm at Yale foreshadowed his love of baseball. In this portrait from 1872, Emperor Meiji is depicted in the traditional Japanese Sokutai court attire, complemented by a tall kanmuri hat and a saku staff, symbols of imperial power. The picture was taken by Uchida Koichi, the only photographer who was officially allowed to photograph the emperor. Paula Hitler, Adolf Hitler's younger sister, was arrested and interrogated by American intelligence officers in 1945 after the war. She lived the rest of her life under the name Paula Wolf and never joined the Nazi Party. Bobby Orr's legendary flying goal ended the 1970 Stanley Cup final with just 40 seconds left in overtime, securing the Boston Bruins' first championship since 1941. The iconic photo that captured the moment when Orr took off horizontally after he was tripped while scoring a goal. A behind-the-scenes photo taken during the filming of Star Trek, the original series, 1967, shows the actors filming a scene in the dining room aboard the USS Enterprise. Some of the space food was actually colored jelly cubes or colored bread. In June 1937, 2 Venezuelan Boy Scouts walked about 8,000 miles in 2 years to attend the first National Scout Jamboree in Washington, covering an average of 25 miles per day. Their journey started from Caracas and became one of the most famous hiking exploits in World Scout history. In 1959, the dome of the U.S. Capitol temporarily turned bright red. It was coated with an anti-corrosion primer to protect cast iron elements after major repairs. This layer had to be applied within 5 hours after removing the old paint. This advertising slogan with minor is a classic example of the aggressive promotion of lead as a useful component for paint in the United States. At the beginning of the 20th century, despite the already well-known toxicity, the American lead industry actively convinced consumers higher lead content means better paint. In 1962, in the wake of cultural changes, parts of American society advocated strict dress codes for women, demanding a ban on the sale of dresses that did not cover the knees while sitting, and appealed to the law of God. Such protests were a reaction to the rapid proliferation of miniskirts and the revolution in women's fashion of the 1960s. In the early 1960s, the United States and Canada banned the sale of modeling glue to minors due to the outbreak of the glue epidemic. Children and teenagers massively used glue for toxic intoxication, which caused media panic and public campaigns. In the 1970s, my friends played a prank on my great-grandfather. They put up a fake official shield on his property. There was an announcement on it about the construction of a 10-story rehabilitation center, allegedly in the fall of 1976. In January 1931, at the Society of Beaux-Arts Architects Ball in New York, architect William Van Allen appeared in a costume parodying the shape of his famous skyscraper, the Chrysler Building. The theme of the evening was that the architects would wear costumes styled after their famous buildings. In 1955, a Roman shoemaker came up with defensive shoes, with metal spurs on the toes and heels to protect girls from harassment on the streets. Such spurs gave the wearer the opportunity to quickly fight back against any street Romeo. In 1963, the overwhelming majority of respondents supported the idea that it is useful for a woman to work before marriage. It provided experience, financial independence, and a better understanding of the outside world. Most of the women noted the importance of work experience and the ability to handle money. In the 1960s, smoking cigarettes on board airplanes was a standard part of air travel. Free cigarettes were freely distributed to passengers, and airlines often equipped smoking areas only formally, since smoke quickly spread throughout the cabin. The first ban on smoking on domestic flights in the United States appeared only in 1988. In this shot from the movie Lolita, 1962, director Stanley Kubrick replaced the name of the camp from the novel. Instead of Camp Q, the jokingly ambiguous Camp Climax for Girls appears in the film adaptation. Such a mischievous choice of name became an example of Kubrick's trademark black humor. On July 2, 1921, the fight for the World Boxing Championship between Jack Dempsey and Georges Carpentier at the Boyle's 30 Acres Arena in Jersey City attracted a record crowd of about 90,000 spectators at that time. It was the first sports event with $1 million box office and the largest in attendance in the United States at that time. In 1955, the average price of gasoline in the United States was 29 cents per gallon, which roughly corresponds to $3.27 in modern prices. Of this amount, most of it went to taxes at all levels and commissions. The tanker actually received only a few cents of profit from each gallon. Elsie Alcock, born in 1918, has lived all her life in the same house on Barker Street in Hathaway, Nottinghamshire, where she was born at the end of the First World War. She grew up the daughter of a miner, survived both world wars, 25 prime ministers, and a change of era. In May 1861, 9-year-old John Lincoln, Johnny Clem, ran away from home in Newark, Ohio, to become a volunteer drummer in the Union Army. Despite being rejected because of his age and height, he persistently followed the 22nd Michigan Regiment until the soldiers accepted him as a mascot and began paying $13 a month. On July 16, 1969, employees at the Kmart store in North Carolina stopped work to watch the historic launch of Apollo 11, the first mission to the moon, on TV. Across America, millions of people, from office workers to salesmen, gathered at storefronts to watch the Saturn V rocket launch live. A 1947 homemaker shows a week of groceries bought for $12.50, about $160 today, with staples like flour, sugar, canned goods, coffee, and produce, milk extra. Back then, the average U.S. wage was near $1 per hour, so this haul cost roughly 1 day's pay. Summer of 1964, an American family vacationing in a station wagon, a living room on wheels from that era, even before the laws on seatbelts and child seats were passed. Cheap gasoline and highways like Route 66 and new intercity highways have allowed millions of people to travel from coast to coast in the same vans. 1968, Saigon. Lo Man Hung, still a schoolboy, worked as an accredited photo reporter, helmet on and press armband at his elbow. He documented the city's turmoil alongside adults, a rare case of a child officially covering a major conflict. Ringling Bros and Barnum and Bailey, the largest traveling circus, toured coast to coast after the war. This Kodachrome portrait captures the strength required for trapeze and hand-balancing acts. Performers trained daily and often doubled as riggers, seamstresses, and tent crew to keep the big top moving. At age 16 in 1965, Robin Lee Graham set out from California in his 24-foot sloop Dove, a solo circumnavigation that National Geographic followed. After 5 years and about 33,000 nautical miles, he finished as the youngest person then to sail around the world, marrying Patty in South Africa along the way. Teen and early 20s portraits of Peter Dinklage, long before his Tyrion Lannister fame. Raised in New Jersey and trained at Bennington College, he later played gigs with the NYC band Wizzy in the 1990s before breaking out in The Station Agent. Every morning in 1974, Masahisa Fukase leaned out of the window of his Tokyo home to take a quick photo of his wife, Yoko Wanibe, on her way to work. The playful daily ritual has become a famous intimate series in Japanese photography. In the early 1920s, Florida's Purity League railed against one-piece swimsuits, dubbing carefree bathers sea vamps. This poster pushed for beach bathing suit inspectors to measure hemlines and curb seaside frolics. London Medical School for Women, Laboratory of Physiology, 1899. Students crowd around microscopes in one of the few laboratories in the UK that train female doctors. Just 4 years after the University of London opened medical degrees to women, these trailblazers began to gain qualifications previously unavailable to them. Victorians pose by the Crystal Palace dinosaurs, the world's first life-size dinosaur sculptures, unveiled in 1854, 5 years before Darwin's book. Though science has moved on, these giants are protected as Grade 1 listed monuments, the same status as St. Paul's Cathedral. Victorians lit Christmas trees with real candles held by metal clips, turning living rooms into glowing scenes for only a few minutes at a time. Buckets of sand and water sat nearby, and many cities even warned homeowners because holiday tree fires were a real seasonal risk. These are Britain's pit-brow lasses, women who worked above ground at coal mines in the late 1880s, shoveling and sorting ore in tough, soot-covered gear. Many wore trousers for safety under or instead of skirts, quietly breaking Victorian dress rules decades before women's workwear became common. A middle-class woman seals the deal by pressing a hiring penny into a young girl's hand in Carlisle's Green Market, about 1895. Hiring fares like this bound a year of domestic service with a single coin on the spot. John Carter's literary machine let Victorians read hands-free. an adjustable bookrest, lamp, and side table mounted to a reclining couch. Marketed in the 1880s for convalescents and dedicated readers, it's an early ancestor of ergonomic reading stands. Hired mutes led Victorian funeral processions, their tall hats, black robes, and staffs wordlessly advertising a family's wealth and respectability. Paid by the day and tipped for solemn theatrics, they faded from fashion in the early 20th century as mourning customs relaxed. In 1936 Germany, officials used crude anthropological tests, like eye color charts, to label people for state records. This photo shows how pseudoscience dressed as medicine enabled discrimination, a sharp reminder that ethics and evidence must lead science. In 1982, a $2.29 mail-order Hawaiian shark stick claimed swimmers could block a shark or eel by wedging this tube in the mouth, complete with the ad's odd note, "Do not bleed." It captures an early 1980s surf safety fad, bold promises, minimal proof, and one of the era's strangest mail-order gadgets. In 1963, Armour sold fully cooked ribs in a can, 2.5 pounds of smoked, sauced pork you simply heated and served. It captured the space-age convenience boom when supermarkets promised backyard barbecue straight from the tin. Hearst's dual gate, his and hers shifter from the late 1960s, gave automatics 2 paths, a normal drive and a ratchet gate for manual upshifts. It came on muscle cars like the Pontiac GTO and Oldsmobile 442, promising one car that could cruise easy and race on weekends.